My name is Tim McKee. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the publisher at North Atlantic Books here in Berkeley. And I'm so honored to facilitate this conversation. And I'm so glad you're here with us. I am then going to ask our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves, because I felt that they might as well say what they want to say. So let me first turn to John Powell, and he can say hello.
Hello. So you may notice I'm sniffling. I think it's allergies are acting up. Nothing. Yeah, no. So I don't know what I want to say about myself. What would you like me to say? You know, all of us do writing, and in a sense, that's the if there is a secret sauce, that's the secret sauce to writing. You're talking to someone, and you're trying to figure out what do you want to know, not what do I want to know. I'm not in a conversation with myself. It can be kind of boring. I will say I have a complicated, beautiful, extended family. I have 6 of 9 children, 2 of whom are no longer with us. And another thing I'll share with you, 2 things. I run the OBI, Othering and Belonging Institute. And friend. And there's something on my mind and heart I want to share with you. I mean, obviously the world is everybody's heart. But every week now it seems like I'm losing friends. You know, someone dies. I actually started making a list of people who either died or have dementia. And I'm over 30 right now, over 30 people. And that's just weighing on me. You know, it's like my peer group in some ways is thinning out. So, but I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad I'm here with you. And I look forward to the conversation.
To his left is Yuria Celidwen, and yes, hello.
Lekta lishe ba meyesh wukun awan ikun galabay behon ekbay yun talishe. That's my indigenous Maya Patzico language. I always start with the language because the language of my lands, the highlands of Chiapas in Mexico, a land called Cuelha, the wonderlands of flowing waters. I was born and raised in that village. Unlike dear John, I do have an agenda that I want to transmit, that I want to communicate. And that's the kind of life that I have lived myself, the kind of life that my relatives have lived for generations, and also all our relatives of indigenous peoples around the world, that we have up to 20 years of less of life expectancy, and a series of other issues that really concern us and that we are mostly erased from culture. So I do want to communicate that. The book was precisely to share that. I was approached to write a book just about indigenous contemplative practices, and being my first book, I said no. Like I am a dreamer, trickster, culture shifter, and so for that I needed to explain what it means to be indigenous, what it means to embody indigeneity, which right now, you know, it's being extracted, appropriated, commodified, capitalized, etc. So I needed to take a much longer narrative, a much longer sharing of the stories of myself and my peoples. So I honored those lands, I honored those peoples, I honored the Ohlone Wishan peoples of these lands as well. And I wanted to bring those stories into the known. So thank you for being here, and thank you for having interest in our stories.
To her left is Aida Mariam Davis. Hi there.
Hey, good afternoon. Are we awake? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, friends. My name is Aida Mariam Davis. the tradition of my elders, I'm first going to acknowledge my sister friends and family who have joined today. So shout out to them. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. I am both a living testament and an evangelist of the dignity and distinction of the African way of life. I wrote this book, much like my peers and colleagues here, to really not only embody, but also share the epistemologies of the African and indigenous way of life as an alternative to what we are living. I think that it is a way that we have often rejected out of routine and out of a kind of mechanical, capitalistic, settler colonial way of being. And there are a lot of offerings that I'm happy to share with you all on how we can make those shifts. Before I hand it over to my friend here, I want to also acknowledge Tim here, my publisher. Shout out to North Atlantic Books. Woo! Not just for publishing my text, but I had another publisher that dropped my book because the ideas were too radical. They were too black. They were too indigenous. And while those people may have tried to diminish those ideas, I was embraced by my editor, by the publisher, so I want to publicly acknowledge and thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. And David J.
Thank you so much, David J., he, him pronouns. And I think I am here, sitting here today because of a journey away from loneliness that I've been on for my life. I identify as asexual, and when I was younger, I started a community that became a central gathering point for people who identify like me, and I got to experience how inviting people out of loneliness was this source of collective care, it was this source of collective power. It felt like the most incredible thing. I owe deep gratitude to like my elders, my movement elders, my trans elders, my union elders who taught me how to be a movement in that way. But the more I saw that power, the more I was like, oh, no one wants to pay the people to do this, even though we need it really deeply. And I kind of eventually quit my job and started researching, like, why can't we fund this? And that is what turned into the book. And I think that question, to me, is deeply tied up in, like, why we are facing a crisis of loneliness. I think it is deeply tied to white supremacy, deeply tied to settler colonialism, and something I believe, which is why I'm so excited to be in this panel here today, is that our best path out of that is reconnecting with the lineages of wisdom we have about how to be in a relationship. And I'm so excited to learn from you all in that today.
Cheers. Yeah, this was a fun panel to prepare for because first I read their book, and whoever curated these four being together was very smart. J.K. Fowler or Dora, maybe. Because when I read these, I was like, everyone should read all four of these together. Because they're not twins, but they're definitely cousins. And so I learned something from each of them, but the intersections were just paramount. So when it came time to figure out what questions to ask them, I basically highlighted all of the literal questions in their books. So every sentence that ended with a question mark, I highlighted in here. And I then took, 5 each from their books. And so those will be our questions for most of the session, are a question from their book that I'll ask another one of them. Because I figured, why not have them answer each other's questions? And it will leave 15 minutes at the end for y'all to ask questions. So, if you do, at that point, we'll get there, there'll be a chance for you to raise questions. So, let's get started. Aida, I was going to ask you the first question. And it's from John's book, The Power of Bridging, How to Build a World Where We All Belong. And in that book, he asks this question: how do we move from a world built on breaking and othering to one built on bridging and belonging?
It's a beautiful question. Thank you, John, for posing. So that we have shared understanding, I want to offer a definition of belonging. I used to think belonging was emotional, physical, psychological safety, often that others created or provided for me. I now believe belonging is anywhere I go. Wherever I'm at, I belong. That paradigm shift, to me, has changed my outlook and how I believe I can create new worlds within the world that we have. Even more than that, I think it's important to consider, and I submit this to you all, that power and belonging are similar, right? You can only realize it. People don't give you power. You realize your belonging. And if we keep our focus on building and bridging, that first is an internal experience. It's how we see ourselves, how we love ourselves. So when I think about what it takes, it is a reconnection to our ancestral and original selves. But I also think belonging is the foundation for our work and our world. When we think, I created a framework called Belonging, Dignity, Justice, and Joy. This framework is one that I have led many companies through to consider an alternative to DEI. Now, this was long before the attacks on DEI. I do want to name that. But DEI calls us to assimilate, right? You and I, as people of color, Black folk, whatever your intersectional identity is, we are diverse. Why? Why am I a diverse candidate? Can anyone tell me why? Because I'm not white. Thank you. Yes. And when we say inclusion, what are we saying? I want to be where? Thank you. And so belonging says where I'm at is where we can start building from. We can look at maroon societies. You can look at the very fact I created an alternative. We can create new worlds within the world that we're in. And the way we begin that process is to do small things, is to do mutual aid, is to create savings communities. It's to create things in the immediate sense for ourselves that affirm our humanity even when others don't see it or don't affirm it.
That's right. Thank you. John, I was going to ask you this question from David J's book. David's book is called Relationality, How Moving from Transactional to Transformational Relationships Can Reshape Our Lonely World. Wonderful book. And in that book, John, David asked this question. He said, if we are becoming more and more capable at building what we want, and what we want is to connect with one another, then why are we rapidly getting so much lonelier?
Great question, David. Building off of what you just said, I think it ties to that question. Belonging is not something we want, in a sense. It's something that constitutes who we are. I was at a conference a couple of weeks back with a good friend of mine who works with restaurant workers, 14 million restaurant workers in the United States. And she was saying, you gotta really figure out what they want and give it to them. And I said, no. From my perspective, the mistake of that is putting wants at the head of the line. And if capitalism has taught us nothing else, is that our wants can be hacked, hijacked, and manipulated. You can't trust them. You can't trust them. It's like being an addict. If I could just get more of that, then I'd be okay. You're already okay. And one of the things about belonging and about loneliness, about wanting, think about wanting. Just play with this over the next week or so. Wanting is an expression of discontent. When you're really at peace, you're not wanting. Wanting is saying something's missing. If only I could have that, I'd be okay. So in that process, we are deferring being okay. It's after I get recognition, after I get that job, after I get that relationship, after I get that house, after I get that, after. There's no after. So how does that relate to belonging? Belonging is very subtle. It's not just emotional, it's constitutive. Think about this. We all came in the world. Anybody here doesn't have a neighbor? We all came in the world attached to another human being. We all came in the world attached to the earth. We're already belonging. And then we spend much of our time in structures denying that. I said we cut the umbilical cord, but we never cut the spiritual connection to each other and the earth. And it's realizing that, right? So it's not, in a sense, even, it's recognizing, it's reclaiming. It's, so all of these structures for the last 400 or 500 years, we call modernity, capitalism, whatever, has been a denial of our connection to each other. And I won't go through all of it. I talk about some of this in my book. But think about this. I talk about my father being a Christian minister, and I said, so what is sin? What is death? He said, sin is separation. Death is separation. So we start off, we're separated from the universe. Right? We're separated from the universe. Father of modern physics, that's what he told us. We're separated from each other. We're separated from God the divine. And then, if that's not enough, the father of Western philosophy, I think, therefore I am. We separate the mind and body. So everything we see, we separate. And then we spend the rest of our time trying to heal it. That's the loneliness. The loneliness is recognizing that separation. But the healing of it is to recognize that we're not separated. And then also to practice it.
Yeah. Thank you, Yuria, hey there. I'm so happy to meet you. Aida, in her book, which is called Kindred Creation, Parables and Paradigms of
Flourishing kin. Indigenous.
Oh, no, sorry. I was saying Aida's book. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Her book is Flourishing Kin, which is Indigenous Wisdom for Collective Well-Being. So that's Yuria's book. Yeah, no problem. But in Aida's book, Kindred Creation, Parables and Paradigms of Freedom. We're all good. We're all good. She asked this question that I hope you can answer. She asked, what if we saw the true value of the discarded, of the invisible, of the captive? What if we saw the true value of the discarded, the invisible, and the captive?
Just as John built on Aida's and the questions that we are all here, challenging the way also Western ontologies have made us believe that the mind or the brain goes before the body, rather than I think, therefore I am. We relate, therefore we connect, right? We are. So, responding as well to the emphasis on capitalist or transactional relationships, why would we have to see a value onto another when we are already part of these necessary relationships to be, right? So what if we see the value? What if we didn't? What if we didn't have to put any value onto any relationship. And we just embrace those relationships and honor those relationships with the reverence that we have for just existing, for life. So I believe that part of giving value onto objects severs the relationship to the subject, right? So then the othering happens because we do not see the connection, we do not see the relationship with other beings, with other subjects, right? We see just objects that we can then get something from. That's where it's the value, right? Oh, more value if I get something more. What if we discarded all of that? And then we could all just be subjects. Every living being, from natural phenomena to whatever we sometimes perceive as inert, right? What if everything, every being would be cared and attended to as we do with our closest relationships, right? We could see that navel that John was talking about is a spiritual navel that connects us to all of us around. And what if we see the world as that, as having this inherent beingness, that is way beyond value, right?
Yes, thank you.
May I ask something,
Yeah.
please? I ask you to also, please don't clap. And I ask this because I ask you to reflect in what we're saying, not as an entertainment, not as clapping is usually a way of appraisal, right? But what if we could take in really what we are sharing, as we are conversing, as a contemplative practice, as a moment of silence, of really sobering ourselves, not just as mere entertainment, but as opportunities to really go deeper into the ways that we can really connect and shift the severance that we are living right now in this country.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tim, may I add?
Yeah.
Since this is now a generative conversation,
Do it.
Aida has entered the chat. Because we live in a world of multiple truths, I would also love to offer, in the Black and African tradition, we do call and response. We do clap sometimes. It is a way to show energy and love. So I wonder, how do we do all of that together? Because I couldn't agree more that we need the contemplative space. I need it. And at the same time, I do like to connect and engage and feel the energy and have that. So, audience, what do you think? Okay, snaps. I like that alternative.
Yeah, we could have it that when one of them is speaking, you do what you want. So you could shout out, you could be silent, you could clap. How about that? Yeah, I love this invitation.
If I could jump in since multiple truths. So can we do not either or, but both and? And there's a thing of space, of creating space for things to generate. So it could be that we say, instead of clapping immediately, take 40 seconds to reflect. And then if you're so inclined, stomp your feet, click your heels, clap. But to have that space to actually just slow down a little bit, just to go. So anyway, I just offer that as a both and. Can we play with that?
Nice. Thank you.
That's why elders are important.
Nice, thank you all. David, I was going to ask you the next question, and it's from Yuria's book, Flourishing Kin, Indigenous Wisdom for Collective Well-Being. Okay. This is a hard one, but I figured you could do it. The question is,
I'm intimidated.
what wicked influence convinced us of guarding an inner self against our dreams? Yuria asked, what wicked influence convinced us of guarding an inner self against our dreams?
I love the framing of that question. And what comes to mind, something I reflect on a lot, it's in the subtitle of my book, is the difference between the relational and the transactional. Part of my journey as an asexual person has been wanting to understand what a relationship is. I spent years and years trying to come up with just a definition for myself. And the one I landed on, which was, I think, inspired in part by my grandfather, inspired by the works of Octavia Butler, is that a relationship exists when we change one another. The more deeply we change one another, the more powerful the relationship is. And I've been working with that definition now since 2012, and one of the things that it has taught me is that relationships are not predictable. The better we are at creating them, the better we are at creating the spaces for them, the less we know about exactly where they're going to go. Anytime I enter a place where I am being changed, I'm open, I'm willing to be changed, I surrender control over where that place will take me, where that relationship will take me. And when I have thought about the history of loneliness, when I thought about that separation, John, that you talk about so powerfully in your question, I think about all of the ways that I think that a culture of capitalism, of colonialism, of patriarchy, of white supremacy has told us that we need to control the world around us to be safe. That unless we control the world around us, unless we make it transactional, unless we make it predictable, then we will not experience safety, we will not experience happiness, when the opposite is true. Creating a world that is controlled, creating a world that is predictable around us, is a path towards loneliness, it is a path towards isolation that is, has been a threat to our survival for most of human history. And so I think about releasing that need for control, releasing that need for predictability, trusting in relationship, trusting in the deep wisdom that my mind and body and community ancestors have about how to know what the path to relationship looks like, as a way of breaking down some of that separation.
Thank you. Aida, this question comes from Yulia as well. Yuria, sorry. And in Kindred Creation, she asked,
Flourishing kin.
oh, thank you.
Woo! Did I get you?
Y'all are one step ahead of me, which is good. Who taught you to love yourself?
I think instantly of Malcolm X. Do you all remember who taught you to hate the color of your skin, the shape of your nose, the texture of your hair? In a speech at a funeral, actually, in May 1962, Malcolm X talked about why are we relying on our oppressor to tell us about ourselves, about our beauty, about our value and our worth. This is absolutely ridiculous. He goes on in that same speech to say the black woman is the most disrespected person in America, the most unprotected person in America, the most neglected person in America. And so when I think about, so Malcolm X is part of it, but when I think about who taught me to love myself, it's black women. Black women have taught me First, the meaning of freedom. And when I talk about freedom, I'm not, unfortunately, the right has co-opted the word, not the idea, but the word. And my definition is freedom is the absence of subjugation, but the presence of self-determination. And I'm just going to take a moment because I love love and freedom. There are 3 Black women who really embody this. Fannie Lou Hamer, who said, none of us are free if all of us aren't free. A kind of communal, sense of freedom. Angela Davis, who said, freedom is a constant struggle. So it's constant, communal, constant. If you read my book, you'll know I love alliteration. So we don't get one more C in. And Harriet Tubman wanted complete freedom. She didn't ask for more humane slavery. She asked for complete freedom. And I think all of that is about self-definition, how we define ourselves for ourselves. Tim, you've heard this story, so I'm going to subject you to it one last time. When I met Angela Davis, I asked her what it was like being on the FBI's most wanted list. I'm telling you all right now, do not ask her that. That's the first thing. Secondly, though, and here's why. We went from drinking champagne, being giggly and fun, to I was never a fugitive. I made myself unavailable to the state. What she's saying there, at least what I took away, was I didn't commit a crime. I'm not guilty, and I'm not subscribing to what the state calls me. I have a different name. I made myself unavailable. I'm not participating in this state-sanctioned, hunt. And, ultimately she was obviously exonerated, but the point is, they don't get to define me. I define myself. I make my own world. I make my, reality. And so for me, it's women like that. It's people who have suffered and have dealt with so much, and you touched on that with all the folk who've taught you, that it's through the suffering and the lived experiences of people who remind me my humanity still shines bright, even when, like you said, it has been assigned a value. Whether or not I subscribe to it, there has been a value, and that we should reconsider that. So, shout out to the Black women.
John, David, in his book, asked this question. I'm curious what you'd say. John, the question is, what are ways that you welcome the process of being changed by the relationships that surround you? What are the ways that you welcome the process of being changed by the relationships that surround you?
Great question, David. I think part of it goes back to what you suggested earlier. And that is that it's in relationships that we change and we grow. My understanding is, and I'm borrowing from that obscure figure named Buddha, everything changes. And to sort of sit in that can be very relaxing or can be absolutely terrifying. How many of you know the name Archimedes? Some, okay. There's a concept called Archimedes point. Archimedes basically is a Greek thinker, philosopher. And he said, if I could find one point in the universe that didn't change, I could actually move the rest of the universe. I need to find one thing that does not change. Unfortunately, Archimedes never bumped into Buddha. Because he'd have said, hey dude, there's no such thing. So part of it is just relaxing into that. And so then all of this, not just all the lessons, but life can come through. Things that potentially doesn't change, I say potentially because I don't think it's right, would be death. think about it. And things, earlier we described the fear associated with not being in control. What comes to mind when I think about that is that how we all like parks, and Bay Area has wonderful parks, but we love parks. But then if you go read Grimm's fairy tales, everybody's afraid of the forest. Terrible things happen in the forest, but nice things happen in the park. So what's the difference? Well, in the park, you put a flower someplace and you stay there. Coming back tomorrow to see if you're still there. You know, don't change. Don't worry, I'll give you a drink of water tomorrow. I'm controlling you. And everything's in this place. Whereas when you go into the forest, it's, oh shit. I don't even know where I am. Who is that big bad wolf? Why are you talking to me? I was trying to find Grandma's house. You don't look like Grandma. So my point is that I think part of the process is giving up this notion of permanency. Giving up the notion of control. And I think the thing that we see expressed in multiple ways is the fear of lack of control. So huge armies, huge militaries, huge police, really trying to control not just the earth, which can't be done, but each other. Those unruly people, those black women, people I don't understand. So I think part of it is learning to relax in that. And once you relax in that, it's like, I mean, I don't know is not a bad thing. It can be a wonderful space. But most of us are taught, if you don't know, fill it up. Make up something. If you're an AI, hallucinate. So I think really relaxing into not knowing and not being in control, life comes through. One last thing, I know loneliness. David, you write about loneliness. By some accounts, loneliness is a new word. It's only a couple hundred years old. And its first iteration was not loneliness, it was oneliness. Oneliness. And there's a beautiful story about it, and I don't have time to go all through all of it because of time, but it used to be that we thought of retreating to ourselves in communion with God. And that's why privacy is so important. It was like, I'm having a party, but as cool as all of y'all are, you're not invited. I'm hanging out with God, it's me and God. And then at some point, that guy, what's his name? Nietzsche? Said, God is dead. It's like, wait a minute, who's coming to my party then? Now I'm hanging out by myself, oneliness. And again, it's another expression of, am I in control?
We have time for one more question, then we're going to open it up to you all. Yulia, I wanted to ask you, Yuria, my apologies. This question came from John's book, and he asked, what does it mean to not put off life? What does it mean to not put off life?
Weaving then again our voices, stories, this idea of control, right, that makes us demand from life something specific, about something that we want, or something that we have told that we want, or we have been conditioned to want, prevents us from being in a space when we are not expecting something. But that space of unexpectedness, if we are present, allows us to relate and to discover the spark and the uniqueness in all that we encounter. It allows us to break from our ego narrative of me, I, into curiosity, into what a beautiful smile you have. And I wonder where you grew up, and what did your ancestors say? What's your favorite color? Is this making sense to you? It allows me to break up and become softer, right? Not trying to confront or demand, or then we go back to the moment of safety, softness, tenderness, connectedness, possibility, unknown, and embracing what is, and that what is may be not what we are expecting, maybe not the safety, maybe not the comfort or the softness or the tenderness, because life is all the complexities. Life is also the hurt and the wounding and the storms, but the lightning and the rainbows and the baraka, that our siblings in the Sufi tradition say is the very soft rain of the divine, that moist our presence. So that allows us to be in our bodies, that connection with the divine is not private. It's not, oh, I need my loneliness to be with the divine. But the divine is here, in the connecting, in the vulnerability, in the being without knowing, without demanding, in the being broken, wounded, tender, present.
So, if you have a question, raise your hand, and my colleague here will bring you the mic. And oh, I ask that in the interest of time, since we want to hear from everybody, cut to the chase and ask a question, don't make a comment. Thank you.
My question is, when you're feeling separated from yourself or from the universe, Earth, what is a practice that we can maybe try to repair that connection?
My attempt to contribute to this field of contemplative studies was because my perception was that all the Western translations of these contemplative practices have been extracted from Eastern traditions and then had suddenly taken the personality of the West. The individual well-being, my benefit, my little private paradise. In indigenous traditions of the world over, it's all about how do we relate? How can we be in the messiness that it is life and the messiness that it is to be human, and still feel belonging and still be ready to mend the wound, ready to mend the hurt, to come together, to talk about this and repair. And how do we talk about this and repair with those that maybe not have this human language, right? So in the book, I attempted to share some of these practices, also by sharing the meaning of these practices, the contextual aspect of these practices, into how do we relate with life, with the more than human relatives, connections that we are. And it starts about starting to decondition or compost all those stories that we have been imposed upon about inadequacy and doubt and that we talked about, and rather relearn how to listen and be curious with life, knowing that we belong just because we exist. We belong because we are alive, and we belong as much as we start realizing and reverencing the relationships that we build, that we tend, that we connect with. And it is a process because we have been conditioned not by 500 years, but like thousands of this one single narrative of who gets to be recognized, right? That everything in existence can be dominated. So as we start dismantling that story of domination and start shifting to a story of relationships, then we start also being, feeling, knowing in our bodies, embodying belonging and relationality and connectedness and kin.
This question is for David. When you were talking about kind of history and lineage, you specifically mentioned learning or finding inspiration from trans activism. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that in terms of kind of lineage or organizing histories?
Yeah, I think of two activists in particular, Mara Kiesling and Esper Bergman, who, so I was this young asexual kid, right? Like, we'd started this community. We felt like we were queer, but we were still learning how to show up in these places. And we'd go to this big conference, and every time I went there, it was the trans activists, like a lot of people didn't know what to do with us as asexual people. It was the trans activists who took me aside, and said, like, I think you all are doing something here. I think that talking about asexuality is an important part of sexual liberation. I don't know how, but my instinct tells me you have something to share. And so they sort of took me aside and said, like, this is what you're capable of. This is how you should be showing up. Like, it's important to show up to people who are new to your community and welcome them in. That's one of the most important and sacred things that you can do. They were the ones who took me aside and said, like, look, the DSM-5, the big book of mental disorders, is coming up for review. You all are listed in it, and you should advocate to get out of it, which we did, and we won. They were the ones who told me I was thinking of starting a family. I'm part of a 3-parent family, which is really beautiful, which has been a beautiful experience for me, and they were the ones who gave me wisdom on how to be in family in queer ways. And so I think those are some of the examples that come to mind.
Thank you. I am very inspired by all of the truisms that we've been talking about today. But I feel like it takes deep unlearning and deep healing to be able to show up in practice in these ways. to strangers and even to people that we're close with. What are some ways, maybe small ways, that each of you practice these methods of existing without this judgment, creating belonging, and yeah, thank you.
I'll share what I'm up to. So joy is where I go to get energy and to reconnect with myself. And I'm from LA. How many of you know Kendrick Lamar? Super Bowl, maybe you saw it. Maybe you went to GNX last week. Whatever your connection is, as an Angelino, as someone who lives in South LA, not Compton, but nearby, watching, just witnessing someone reconnect with their literal tribe, their hood, with Compton, bringing them with him. So everywhere he went, they were right there. Even some Bay Area folk. Yes. We saw some turf folk, you know, in the Super Bowl, yes. And definitely at the show. But that gives me so much life. It's life-giving. While I am not freestyling, I am learning line dances. I don't know how familiar you are with, you know, it's a big part of, and not just country, while shout out to Cowboy Carter, I am learning, you know, the Tamia and the Elmo slide. I have a lot of kids in my life. Cha-cha slide, electric slide, you gotta stay ready for weddings. And so I have been finding movement, drumming, which is why I encourage people to like stomp, clap, whatever it is, because it literally vibrationally changes my body. And with all of the crisis, chaos, and cruelty we've been witnessing and experiencing, to me, it's one of the ways we can just reimagine our world in the immediate sense. One other example I'll give that is Bay Area based. Thank you for the gift of Ryan Coogler, friends. I just want to say thank you. Oakland and the Bay Area created genius, an artistic genius, and just being able to, while that wasn't necessarily life-giving in the same way, to see interconnection, just to witness art, I guess that's to really engage with it is such a gift, and it reminds us of our humanity.
My question is about basically aging and like the practicalness of what you guys are saying in the world we're in today. What does that look like towards the end of your life? More the half when you're dealing with aging parents and the cost. Like I love all the like the spiritual and esoteric, but there's some like real practical stuff happening for a world to work for everybody at any age. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on it.
Because in our community, the elders have the last word. The first and the last word.
So thank you for the question. Now I think I'm going to take a nap. You know, I opened up by sharing that so many of my friends have passed, as Robert Alexander. Just as a backstory, I came out here from Detroit. My family were sharecroppers from the South. I was one of the first children born in the North. A lot of stuff, you know, growing up black in America, anytime, but certainly in the 1950s, was challenging for me and for white people, right? I mean, I remember someone saying, you know, where do you belong? And I say, I belong everywhere. I belong everywhere, which is hard for people to hear. And watching stuff happen to my parents, watching people literally die because of racism, because they couldn't get medical attention. My parents being sharecroppers, one of the things that means, in addition to working hard and not getting paid, a new form of slavery, is that you do everything yourself. So our furnace stopped working. My dad, you don't call a plumber, you go fix it. And something happened and a spark hit and the furnace blew up and singed all the hair on his body. I was maybe 10 years old. We're driving around Detroit trying to find a hospital that would accept a black man while he's in utter pain. So this is sort of growing up. And realizing that a lot of people really probably should have been here longer if they'd been treated better. And so I came out here to go to school. And there were 6 of us, all black men, who all old. Any of them can answer your question or try at least. But once a year we get together and travel. And it's really a beautiful ritual. And it's also a strange ritual. We show up in the neighborhoods like, what do you guys want? Why are you in my neighborhood? Literally, we have rented Airbnb, and this before Airbnb, and showed up at a place, and people saying, no, you can't be here. But we're also trying to find a way to help each other transition. And I have this strange analogy that I probably shouldn't tell you, but I will anyway. So I feel like when we're in our 20s, we're playing Russian roulette. And the gun has like 64 chambers, and there's a bullet in one of them. So you might still blow your head off, bullet in one of them. But as you age, each year, a new bullet is added into a chamber. And so now I'm in my 70s, and I feel like 63 of those 64 chambers have bullets in them. And I watch my friends, Lonnie Grenier, Bell Hooks, Robert Alexander, all drop. And it's real. So my younger friends, that is still an abstraction, something that might happen sometime in the future, or maybe the tech bros will figure it all out. So we're out of time, but I will say this. I've been thinking of having a death cafe. They have them where people can come together and talk about death and life. Because death doesn't happen for most of us like one minute we wake up and we're dead. It's like, oh wait, my foot doesn't work. I got up and I blacked out. I'm not recovering. I'm supposed to take care of my uncle, but I can't get over there because I can't drive anymore. And so all these things. And in this society, I lived in Africa for a while. In this society, we disparage aging. That's not true in every society. It's not true. I lived in Tanzania. It's not true in some indigenous populations. So it's a challenge, right? It's something we need to come to terms with for both the young and the old. Where are the babies? Where are the toddlers? Why aren't they here? What books are they writing? So anyway, I appreciate the question. I think it's something we have to embrace as a society. Thank you.
We're all out of time, and there's another event here at 5:30, I believe. I'm so grateful to you all, and to you all. We really felt your presence and your listening, and thank you for the questions. Also, just a reminder to support these authors with a hello and a thank you, and buy their book and read them, and ideally buy all 4 and read them in succession. It might just change your life. Thank you.